Now we will start off with the third chapter, that is planning. The topic that we will be doing today is the meaning, features, and importance of planning. Now let's look at the meaning of planning. Planning means deciding in advance or deciding beforehand what is to be done, when, where, how, and by whom it is to be done. Now let's go on to the features or characteristics of planning. The first one is planning focuses on achieving objectives. Every organization has objectives. These objectives will become meaningless if they are not fulfilled. Planning helps to fulfill these objectives. Planning helps to know what action should be taken in order to fulfill the objectives. In other words, planning decides what has to be done in order to fulfill the objectives. The second feature is planning is a primary function of management. So, here the word primary means a very basic function or the very first function of management. Now, let's try and recall all the functions of management. The first one was planning, followed by organizing, staffing, directing, and controlling. But notice that the first one is planning. That is the meaning of primary function. Without planning, the other functions of management will not work. The third one is planning is pervasive. We have come across this word pervasive many times, especially in the first chapter. Pervasive means universal. Planning is universal because it is required in all organizations, at all levels, and in all departments. The fourth one is that planning is futuristic. The word futuristic means looking into the future or something to do with the future. Now we always make plans for something in the future. We never make plans for something that has already happened or passed. Planning involves foreseeing future events and analyzing them and then making plans accordingly. Hence, we can say that planning is a futuristic activity or planning is futuristic by nature. The fifth one is planning is a mental exercise. The word mental means something to do with the mind. So, mental exercise means that planning is done with the help of the mind or brain. We cannot plan properly without thinking properly. And thinking involves the mind. Therefore, we can say that planning is a mental exercise. The sixth one is planning is continuous. Planning is a continuous activity that happens throughout the life of the organization. It can never stop. Therefore, we can say that planning is a continuous process. The last one is planning involves decision making. Planning involves making choices. There may be many ways to achieve a particular thing, but planning helps us to choose the best way to achieve that particular thing. Therefore, we can say that planning involves decision making. Now let's do the questions. The 1 mark questions. What is planning? Planning means deciding in advance what is to be done, how, when, and by whom it is to be done. State the first function of management, planning. Which function of management is a blueprint for future course of action? The answer is planning. Which function of management involves decision making? Again, the answer is planning. Now let's go on to the 2-mark questions. Define planning. You will quote the words of Louis Allen. How is planning a mental exercise? We cannot plan properly without thinking properly, and thinking involves the mind. Therefore, we can say that planning is a mental exercise. State any 2 features of planning. So, for this, you can write planning is pervasive and planning is futuristic, or whichever is easy for you. Now, let's go to the 4-mark questions. Explain any 4 features of planning. For this, you can explain about any 4, whichever is easy for you. Now, the 8-mark question. What is planning? Explain the various features of planning. So, for this, you can explain what planning is. You can even quote the words of Louis Allen and then continue on to explain the features. Now we go on to the importance of planning, or rather, why is it important to plan? So for this, there are 6 reasons. The first one is planning provides direction. Planning tells us in advance how to do a particular thing. Therefore, it gives us a certain direction to follow in order to fulfill that particular thing. Even in an organization, planning provides us with the direction that we must follow in order to fulfill the goals of the organization. The second one is planning reduces the risk of uncertainty. The word uncertainty means something that we cannot or something that we did not expect. In the features of planning, we learned that planning is a futuristic activity. That means it looks into the future. It helps a manager to look ahead and to know about the events that may happen in the future. Since he will be knowing what may happen in the future, the risk of uncertainty can be greatly reduced. Therefore, we can say that planning reduces the risk of uncertainty. The third one is planning reduces overlapping and wasteful activities. The word overlapping here means like the same activity happening again and again, or by 2 departments. 2 departments are doing the same activity. Planning clearly states which department has to do which activity. Therefore, because of planning, different departments will never end up doing the same job. This is called overlapping of activities, which is a waste of both time and money. But planning can prevent overlapping of activities. Therefore, we can say that planning reduces overlapping and wasteful activities. The fourth one is planning promotes innovative ideas. In one of the features, we learned that planning is a mental exercise. Now, it is when we start thinking that new ideas start flowing. And planning involves thinking. These thoughts become ideas, and these ideas become plans. Therefore, we can say that planning promotes innovative ideas. The fifth one is planning facilitates decision making. Again, in the features, we saw that planning involves decision making. In other words, it helps us to make choices. As we discussed earlier, there are many ways to do a particular task. But planning helps us to choose the way that is both cost effective and takes less time. Therefore, we can say that planning facilitates decision making. The last one is planning establishes standards for controlling. Do you remember the meaning of controlling? Controlling means checking the performance against the standards set. Note the word standard here. These standards are set during the time of planning. Therefore, we can say that planning establishes standards for controlling. Let's do the questions now. State any one benefit of planning. So for that, you can write planning provides direction. Name the management function with which establishes standards for controlling. The answer is planning. Now the 2-mark questions. What is decision making in planning? So here you will have to explain the 5th importance of planning, which is planning facilitates decision making. State 2 importance of planning. Here you will mention only the headings of any 2 importance of planning. Now the 4-mark questions. Explain the importance of planning with any 4 points. Here you can write about any 4 whichever is easy for you. Before we wind up, let's quickly recall. So planning means deciding in advance what is to be done, when, where, how, and by whom it is to be done. So there are 6 features of planning, 7 features of planning. The first one is planning focuses on achieving objectives. Planning is the primary function of management. Planning is pervasive. Planning is futuristic. Planning is a mental exercise. Planning is continuous, and planning involves decision making. On the other hand, you can see that there are 6 importance. First one is planning provides direction. Planning reduces the risk of uncertainty. Planning reduces overlapping and wasteful activities. Planning promotes innovative ideas. Planning facilitates decision making, and planning establishes standards for controlling. I hope you understood all the points we discussed. The rest of the chapter we will learn in the next class. Thank you, girls, and have a nice day.